Hey everybody, welcome back to East Oak Studio with another interview. We are so excited to have Adam Hall on today. He is an amazing seascape master, in my opinion. He's done such a great job, and he has just a fabulous story. I was talking to him a while back, and I was just like, "No, man, we've definitely need to have you on. You've got such a great story of where you came from. A lot of people would be inspired." Really think that he's got a lot of good information about what it takes to be an artist, how what it's like to kind of go from a completely different career and switch over. But also just to let you know, we are also wanting to promote what he's doing right now. So he has a couple of shows. One that just opened, that's kind of a collective show that opened yesterday with Advent Gallery in Denver, Colorado. So you need to go check out their gallery. It's a mini solo show, it looks like, and mostly small ocean studies. And hopefully what we can do is we'll put a few links in the description so that you can be able to link onto both of these galleries that we're announcing, so that if you are interested in having something beautiful on your walls, you can go and support those artists. The next one is the Lang Gallery, right? In the Lang Studio Gallery?
Yeah, Robert Lang.
Robert Lang. Robert Lang Studio Gallery in Charleston, South Carolina. And that's opening in a few days. That's on July 2nd. And it is a 4-person show with Robert Lang, Karen Jurek, and Alexander, how do you say it? Chistov?
I think so. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm glad you went, because I always say it wrong.
I definitely am one of those people. I'm like, don't ever trust how I read something. So, and then of course Adam's work, and that show is titled Looking Forward. So, Adam, tell me a little bit about that show and what the title is about for the people who are interested.
Yeah, this was Robert Lang's idea. He's one of the co-owners. Him and his wife own the gallery, him and Megan. But Robert's idea was, hey, I have like this handful of artists who do these really cool paintings of the viewer kind of in the environment that the painters like to paint. And so let's just do a show around that idea, and each person kind of tackle it in their own way. And so, that the theme is basically some of the figures, like obviously the ones I do are very anonymous. But the others, you kind of get side profiles, but it's usually the back of a viewer staring into the environment that each one of us likes to paint. So mine, obviously, I love to paint these kind of reflective spaces, like standing in front of the ocean, being in the forest and nature, whatever it might be. So mine are focused on that, and they each have their own very specific take on it as well. So,
wow. That's going to be awesome. So guys, that starts July 2nd. And so keep a lookout for it. We'll have more of those details in the description for this. Also, Mackenzie Swenson, we're finally releasing her figure painting from life video that she's done with us. We've been painstakingly going through and editing it, where we've got 27 hours all of the best parts of her painting process, and it's got every single sentence she said in it. We just made sure that it was condensed so for it to be digestible, and really looking forward to that. And then we also have a live workshop with Donald Journey called The Invented Interior. We've had him on before. If you haven't checked his other one out on The Invented Landscape, it is stunning. He does all of his work from memory. And so we're complementing that one with his interior work, and we're going to do one with him inventing the interior. That's coming up in July, and that's going to be a live workshop, not in person, but live online through our subscription platform. So more information about that will also be in the description. If y'all want to ask Adam any questions while we're going through the interview, please share those questions in the comments for either Facebook or YouTube, and we'll make sure to see if we can get to them. So, and Liz Gridley already said hello and good morning. So thank you, Liz. If you have anything else you'd like to ask, feel free to. But first, Adam, you started off in a different career, which is really interesting because it's very similar to Josh LaRock as well, where you started into one field and then went into another, and both your fields were kind of in a similar spot and then made a transition. Could you just kind of tell us a little bit of how you got into this world? Who are some of the people that like ignited this passion to do this, and what you were doing before?
Yeah, thank you, man. Well, hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
I'm excited to be here, and I know we chatted before, and so I really, really appreciate the invitation. So thank you.
It's our honor.
But so yeah, man, I moved to Nashville in '99, and I guess my first love was in the arts, even though I was drawing and all that sort of thing forever. But I would say my first like love and as far as pursuing something as a career was in the music industry. And so when I came to Nashville all bright-eyed and like ready to conquer the music industry, man. And so I started out, that's what I studied in school, was music business. I minored in music performance. And so my interest eventually developed into the recording studio side of things. So like my senior project, everything was based around recording records. And then my first few jobs and all my internships throughout school were all in the studio and different A&R fields, or A&R companies, sorry, some publishing companies. But it was all about making music. And that was kind of my creative outlet, was figuring out how to get this sound and how to capture this, and like the experimentation that would go on in the studio. That was like what I was drawn to. And so that's what I did for a long time. And then eventually I got tired of that, and I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. And so I got more interested in the live side of things. So like doing road managing, going out on tour and living that life. And so I'd spent many, many years living on a tour bus.
Wow.
And which was amazing, because at that time in my life, I wasn't married, no kids. So I got to kind of experience the world and just travel. And so that was an incredible thing. And that was mostly, my touring side of things was mostly in the Christian music business. So a lot of the bands that I toured with were in that genre of music. And so, which comes with its own very interesting situation along the way. But yeah, so that led to, whenever I was not touring, I was valet parking cars on the weekends to make extra cash. And so I would just have these odd jobs, whenever I was not on tour. I was banquet serving, doing whatever I could do, living in a house full of guys. It was a little bachelor pad at that time. And all my friends they were musicians as well. So we were always like missing each other. One would be out on tour and I'd be home. And so such a glorious time.
Wow. Yeah, no kidding. It was the true rock star life, huh?
Yeah, man, it was so much fun. Yeah, that season of life, I think back to it so much. But so eventually, but to say during all that time, I had a little setup in my house where I was painting, but it never computed in my mind like that's something that I could do to actually make a comfortable living. And also there was part of me that was like, I felt like a little bit guilty to abandon like all the time I had spent on this thing and all the money that was spent to go to college for this thing. I felt like, well, I can't like abandon that. I've spent all this time now kind of climbing this ladder of experience. And so a compromise for me was, well, while I was on the road, I started to learn graphic design and do merch for bands. And so I was like, well, that's art. Like that's so, and I wanted to get off the road because I was in a relationship and I knew that was getting serious and I just couldn't be gone all the time. But I still hadn't quite figured out what it meant to be a full-time painter. So the compromise was, well, if I'm doing graphic design, I'm still using my degree because I'm doing it for bands and that's music business. And so that was the route that I went. And so I might be getting my timeline a little off here, but I eventually went into graphic design and kind of worked my way up the ladder there, where I was working for an ad agency for a while. Then I was working for a company that just did nothing but merch for bands and sports teams and stuff like that. And then finally, I kind of like landed my dream job in graphic design, which was working for Warner Music, where I got to kind of, go to New York and do all this stuff that like I thought was like what I really wanted. And then I realized like, oh, like this isn't really like what I want. This is like awesome. But it was like every time, I'm skipping a lot, but during this whole time, I was kind of using art as a side hustle. So I was trying to bring in income with painting on the side, but it was just I never focused enough time on it to where I thought it could be full time. Mm-hmm. And so, but it was what I really loved and what I really wanted to be doing. But every time I thought about making that jump, I'd sit down with my wife and talk to her about, hey, do you think like now would be a good time to try to do this art thing full time, and ditch the graphic design? And as soon as I would like go to make that decision, like I would come into work and they'd be like, hey, we're thinking about promoting you to like creative. It was always like this new carrot dangling in front of me, or like my wife getting pregnant, or like whatever it might be. Yep. Like I was always terrified of the idea of making that leap. So it took me a lot longer than it probably needed to make that leap, just out of fear. But I also wanted to approach becoming a full-time artist like, the whole you don't want your dream to become a nightmare scenario. Like I always wanted to dip my toe in it and slowly build something till I felt really comfortable. And everybody's comfortable levels are different before they make that leap, for sure. But with mine, it just took a really long time to finally make that leap. And then there was also a lot of like things that happened that were, I think I told you about like traveling overseas, and then like having a guy who kind of gave me some really good advice, an artist here in town named David Wright. He's a frontier artist, and he gave me some like amazing advice as well. And so there was a lot of people kind of speaking into my life with regard to how to approach it. So that helped as well. But I hope I didn't like ramble on too much there.
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm trying to like write down some things, because when you say some things, I'm like, oh yeah, I have a question about that. So the funny thing is where, sometimes we feel like what we have done, or when we're trying to like switch careers, that it's all sort of a loss if you're about to leap over to something else and start all over again. But I find oftentimes that the experiences that we have, there's always something that translates over to the new thing. And I feel like the fields that you were in and some of the things that you were doing was probably developing some very powerful skills to be able to be an independent creative, especially in the beginning. What is it? What are some of the skills that you feel like from being on the road and managing bands, and then, maybe even in the recording world, but then most certainly as you get into like the graphic design world and advertising, like what are some of those skill sets that you feel like were powerful to be used to help launch your career?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is, I think whenever you're dealing with musicians and being on the road, you kind of get accustomed to what it is to grind. Like, just the relentless grind. And so I think I was exposed to that with being in that field, to know that like, oh, this is what it takes. Like, this is really hard, and you got to show up every day, even when you're tired, when you're sick, whatever. Like, it's a grind. And so I think that kind of worker mentality with the arts, like kind of you know, it definitely influenced me big time, just to have that work ethic and that grind of, and just the understanding of seeing like all these people who aren't making it and all these people who are making it. And then also, like, just to piggyback off that real quick, I also kind of realized that I was gaining exposure to this idea that, like, I think a lot of people who aren't familiar with the entertainment industry or the arts or whatever, the fine art world, they kind of have this idea of like, you're either a starving artist or you're famous and everyone knows it. But what you don't see is that there's all these people who are making a comfortable living doing this thing that's very attainable, that you'll never hear of. Like some of the successful people in the music business, you don't know their names, but they're out there touring, they're songwriters, they're doing whatever it might be. And so that was something that I learned as well, that I was like, oh, like this applies to the arts too, because then I started slowly meeting artists who were making a living. I'd never heard of them. They weren't famous. And so that was something that I think I learned. But as far as like skill set, you know, obviously with graphic design, I think you start to just like get a good eye for things, you understand layout. And you're also being taught, like, especially when I was doing the music industry side of things, you were kind of forced to wear a lot of different hats, and that kind of almost entrepreneurial spirit within a company where you're wearing all these hats and you're trying to you know, and like also like meeting deadlines and like all that stuff kind of plays in to where you know, as an artist, because I'm doing it full time now, so I'm wearing all those hats. I'm having to think of new creative ideas to get my work out there. I'm thinking of branding, marketing, like all the things that like I wish I didn't have to think about.
Right. Every artist wishes they didn't have to think about. Yes.
Yeah. So that's like those are the first things that come to mind, I guess, is of like, you know, that have influenced me out of that industry.
You know, I mean, those are what I was thinking about when you were saying that. I was like, you know, just the skill sets. One, to talk about the infrastructure of having the expectation of meeting the deadlines, and you're in that environment, like you're sort of held accountable by people the whole time when you're in those industries, because you're a part of a team, and if you drop the ball, that's serious, you know. And you see everyone trying to grind together to make this thing happen. But what it does, and what you're really getting at, which I love, is that it instills not only the expectation, but even the grind is kind of achievable, you know, like, you know, and you get into this routine to where when you kind of get on your own, there's no one necessarily holding you accountable day in and day out, except that you know that that's what it takes, and that you can do it because you've done it your whole life, you know. So, and it feels painful, especially if you've never done it, you know. But so a lot of people feel like get out of school, and then they're kind of like, oh, this is so painful to be on such a grind, you know, and do this X, Y, and Z thing. I mean, that's just it. If you want to do this, that's what it takes, you know. Or it's really good to hear. But also just knowing how to communicate with clients, you know, knowing how to communicate, how to get your name out there, which I think you do an excellent job of. And we were just talking about this beforehand, of like how good of a job you do on your social media, just the visual aesthetic of what your Instagram looks like, you know, how often you post, and, you know, even some of those little tips and tricks. What are like some of the things that you would say, you know, about the social media? You know, we were just talking about how it's a love-hate relationship, you know.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, go for it. Run with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really, I guess, you know, I'm definitely picking up on seeing like what other people are doing and copying that sometimes. Because I honestly, a lot of the time, I don't really know exactly, like I haven't studied the algorithms. I'm not some like, you know,
right.
I don't have the bandwidth to like go into all that and really try to figure it out. So, I'm just kind of, trying to stay on top of it to where I'm like, okay, well, I'm in my studio. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to, do at least take some video of at least a couple of things I'm doing. Even if I'm not using it for today, I'll have it for if I want to do something later. So I'm always definitely thinking of like what I'm working on and what would be cool to capture during this process of what I'm working on. So it's definitely, my wheels are turning as I'm painting of how can I use this time to also be for an email blast or for social media. But I honestly, like, I'm still figuring it all out myself. But like you said, what we were talking about before, it's a love-hate relationship. I find myself super distracted by it. And I try to do the whole ghost and post thing, but then it's like, it's hard. Like I said this to you earlier, like I'm envious of my friends who aren't on it at all. And I think if I wasn't an artist, I probably wouldn't be on it at all. Like I think I would maybe have a Facebook for like family that is overseas and stuff, but like I would probably at this point abandon it altogether.
Yeah.
But it's so hard as an artist because like, I was doing my taxes this year and I realized like, oh my gosh, like I actually made a substantial amount of money through Instagram, like through people purchasing work from Instagram. And so that's great, but it's also kind of terrifying in a way because you're like, well, geez, like if Instagram just goes away, like that's a little chunk of money that probably goes away too. And so, so there's that, but yeah, I don't know if I really have any like great tips. Like I try to have like a certain aesthetic of like, this is like, I try not to post just like a bunch of random stuff or selfies or like, I very rarely will post something that has to do with my family or kids on there. I try to keep it very strict to my studio practice and my work. And then that just kind of, I think just cause like my like pattern of what I'm painting, it all kind of fits together well. So I think it just naturally might make my Instagram seem like it flows.
Yeah.
But, yeah, sorry. I wish I had like some really great tips.
Oh no, it's not necessarily about that. Honestly, I hear all the time that it's just feel bold enough to put something out. And it's funny you're talking about like trying to ghost and post it. I'm more ghost than post. I've got to get better to like post.
Yeah.
But it is most certainly the thing that doesn't come naturally to me. So my hat always tipped off to you and any of the people.
On the camera, man. Like it's rare that you will see me on Instagram like in front of the camera talking to you.
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
You'll see my hand painting something or mixing some paint or something, but you'll rarely hear my voice. It's just music and what I'm doing.
I will say the one thing we did talk about right before we got on that I was like, hey, now that was helpful, is because half the time I'm like, how did he get himself in the photo? Like, because usually I'm like, no one's around for me to like, just be like, hey, take a picture of me, yourself while you're trying to like paint, but then like it doesn't feel. But so asking that question, you're talking about that you have like a tripod that you typically use for work that you set up. So talk about like exactly what that looks like the because I was asking, do you use your iPhone or any of that, and how you typically will even take a picture like that if you're by yourself.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I didn't answer you. It froze on one side. Sorry about that. I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I have an iPad Pro on a tripod next to me that I use if I'm working off reference photos. But if I'm posting content, I bought like one of those. It's a little Bluetooth remote that you can get on Amazon that comes with it's like a package deal. It's super cheap. It's like $20, and it comes with a holder for your iPhone, and then it has a little Bluetooth remote that comes with it. And I use that So I'll set up my tripod behind me, and then I'll like hide my little remote so nobody sees that I'm.
I love that.
And to start, and that, because that also connects to your stories, so you can hold down the button and it starts your story behind you if you you don't want to do video and then have to come back and put that if you're just doing it on the fly. So I use that a lot.
Awesome. Well, I might get the name of it. We'll get the name of it and try to put it down in the comments or details, so that if somebody wants to look into that for themselves, like me, we can have it there for the audience. So one of the things that also struck me when we were talking about, you were going on tour, you spent a decent amount like overseas on tour. Like it was a worldwide tour every now and again. Is that right?
Yeah. So the band that I traveled the most with overseas was Petra. the rock, the roll. It was the Petra farewell tour. So and I didn't grow up listening to Christian music. And so that tour was interesting because I didn't know a single Petra song, and they couldn't believe it. They're like, "You're the road manager and you don't know any Petra songs." But that was actually a good thing because there was I wasn't intimidated by it. Like I wasn't.
Yeah.
There was no reference, so I just kind of treated it. It was just it actually made things flow easier. That I wasn't familiar with them and didn't have them built up in my head as the original Christian rock stars,
Right.
Whatever.
You weren't like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Yeah. And so, but it was also very uncomfortable because I was young and they're all very old. And so I'm having to give directions and tell them to wake up and do this and do that. And it's very uncomfortable for a youngster on the bus telling all these old folk, that are like my dad's age, hey, get up, you got to do this radio interview, and feeling this tension and stuff like that. It was just
wow.
The overall relationships were great, but it was just because of the age difference, it was super awkward at times. But the world tour was, it was the last leg of the tour was just we went all over Europe, Brazil, Mexico, and then when I was on that tour, I got a side job working for Food for the Hungry, which is a nonprofit that helps sponsor children in all these different countries, and you child sponsorship program. And so we would have a booth set up at the end of a show and try to sign up sponsors. And because I had a great relationship with them, when the tours were over, I would just go to Africa or go wherever and be a part of the projects that they were doing.
Wow, so that's awesome.
I got to have that experience straight out of the gate after those tours, which was huge to my, I think, or a massive influence on me creatively, I think. Just because that's what I drew from when I started to really figure out that I was kind of a landscape painter at heart. And so that was kind of, those landscapes is what kind of came out of the gate in the beginning when I first started painting landscapes.
Well, see, that was what I was going to get at, which was your travel experience overseas one of the main influences of today? I mean, and I know you paint really a lot more water scenes. There's a few that you don't, that are like waterfalls and that kind of stuff as well. But I was wondering if that was the main thing that was inspiring you, or is there something else that was in there that you, or in your narrative or experience, that got you to want to use that as one of your main subject matters?
Yeah, when I first started out, I was trying to paint, before I was like really taking it seriously, I was trying to do like portraits and like a lot of charcoal drawings. I was doing like some commissions for people. Like I was doing anything at that point, like people's pets and whatever it was, but it just wasn't fun for me. And so I was like in that stage of like, I'd never even tried to paint a landscape. And so after my Africa trip, I realized like, what I'm trying to do here is create something that is moving, and that draws a viewer in this space. And so I was like, well, and that was there was also some advice that was given to me of like, hey, you should from this David Wright artist. He's like, you should try to paint some landscapes. And so it was the first time when I was painting just from my mind and remembering the landscape of Africa, and kind of envisioning what I was going through emotionally, and all the changes that kind of took place internally. It was the first time that like I was painting and I had a smile on my face. Like I never felt that way. And so it was like, oh, it was like that aha moment, like, oh, this is the route that I need to take for right now. And so it just felt natural. It just felt like this is the best way for me to create something that has got the emotion behind it. It's got the reflective quality that what's it called? Like it's almost like a meditative process in a way. It's but yeah, that time there was definitely came out creatively through painting landscapes, and then that turned the light on of like, okay, this is the route that I'm going to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you think that you will continue to push the subject matter in different directions, like, I don't know, color harmonies or tonalities, or even maybe less water and more, actual landscapes situations in the future? Like I always wonder if like, what is the driving force behind why you're doing what you're doing, almost emotionally? Is it one of those things where it's like, I want to progress this, and then maybe there's a whole different color palette and a whole different subject matter that's still within the field? Or is it like, there's something that I keep trying to tap into, that it's about water itself, that makes me want to almost continue to explore it deeper until I find emotionally the thing that actually connects perfectly to what I'm feeling?
Yeah, I naturally transitioned into painting the water. It was like inevitable that I knew that I was going to go down that road of trying out seascapes. I think it just took me a while to get there, because I was still, being that I didn't study art in school, there was a lot of technical things I lacked. And so every time I tried to paint water, it just wasn't, what was in my mind just was not translating. Whereas when I was doing the landscapes or the cloudscapes, like it seemed like I could at least translate it somewhat. With that water, I just couldn't figure it out. And so I've been on this like journey of honestly, there's probably only a handful of ocean paintings where I've been like, okay, I nailed the balance, because I'm always trying to find this balance of the turbulence and the chaos that I feel like parallels our lives, but also at the same time, it can come off as this calm and peaceful feeling. And so I'm trying to tie those two things together. It's like, it's almost like if my ocean paintings were an 80s band, they'd be like The Cure or some emo. Like, it's like I'm always just, for whatever reason, drawn to this emotive style, and I'm definitely still trying to figure out where that's going, and at what point that's going to shift. I don't know. But there are there's always a time where like even with the show that I was doing with a band, I made a little study, and I was like, oh, like those colors really work well together. Mental note, like I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to try to do a larger painting that has, these more like brighter, like higher chroma or higher saturated tones versus the moody stuff that I do all the time. So I'm definitely always making mental notes. which is one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons that I, not to get off the subject, but it's one of the reasons why I love committing to doing shows, is because I feel like anytime I commit to doing a show, number one, I like working under the pressure, and it keeps me focused. But also with the ocean paintings, like, because I do a lot of ocean paintings inevitably in my past 3 shows. But I always end up like finding that I'm leaving breadcrumbs, I guess, where a lot of times a solo show is just kind of a continuation of my last show, of the paintings that I just didn't have time to really explore, or that I found that these colors are something that I haven't tried yet, and that I want to go down that road, and so they're always kind of piggybacking off of each other. It's kind of like when an artist makes a record, you might have 100 songs, and then you dial it down to 12 or 14 for a record, but then you go back to those songs eventually that you had something in that you just didn't get to fully develop. And so it's like that with my ocean paintings, where I have like Post-it notes all over the place of colors I want to try, new ideas. And so I don't see anytime soon me changing directions with regard to not painting the ocean anymore. Because I feel like I have a long way to go before I've really finished, or, like kind of closed out all the ideas. But as far as landscapes, like, I guess I've just never been drawn to painting like a very specific landmark or scene. I've been more interested in like the familiarity of a place, the essence of a vibe. And that's what I've always been drawn to. But that can change. I don't know. Like,
of course.
I might one day decide like that's what I want to do. I want to paint specific places,
Yeah, because you can be I've most certainly have known artists that like are obsessed and passionate about one thing, and then they finally like reach their satisfaction, and they're like, okay, I'm done with that. I'm not going to paint another. I'm not going to paint another wave. I'm good, and I'm going to move on to this whole nother thing that I'm excited or passionate about. So, what the other one of the other things with looking forward, how are you going to be like incorporating with the works that you have in that show with the title of the show? Have you thought about that much?
Sorry, say that again. So with
the looking forward, isn't that the title of the show that's in Robert Lang's studio?
Yeah, so tying my paintings into that title.
Yeah, like did you create? You created specific work for that show with that sort of in mind, like the theme of the show.
Yeah, so we didn't have the title yet, but we all kind of knew like the show is going to be figures looking out into a space, or looking at something, whatever that might be. And so I kind of I had been doing those here and there. It was kind of this. I felt like it was kind of this. What's the word? Like it kind of was like the next stage of like connecting the viewer to a space. Like it was I'm trying to think of the word. It was just kind of like, as I was painting, I was like, okay, what can I do here to take this to another level of like making the viewer feel like they're here? Oh, I'll just create a figure here staring at the space. But what I thought I needed to do was keep the figure anonymous. I wanted it to be, it could be anybody, it could be you, it could be whatever. And I just felt like it somehow was like bridging the gap and connecting the viewer even more so than before. And it just really translated well in the past few shows. And so I've kind of kept exploring that idea of having this viewer kind of standing there taking it all in. And it also kind of helped with having more of a narrative. Like being able to express myself even more. So, I did these paintings that were called Red Bear, Yellow Fox, kind of similar to the one I just did for the show Looking Forward, where it was completely expressing myself with the anxieties I feel of being a parent and allowing, like loosening my grip and allowing my children to kind of go out into the wilderness of life and like and stepping back from that and knowing that that's inevitable, that it's happening. And so like ideas like that, it's like, oh, well, now I can kind of express that thought or those anxieties that I'm feeling through a painting by adding in the figure. And so that's kind of been the evolution of that. And now with this current show, it just fit perfectly because I was like, well, I'm already kind of doing that. So
right.
So yeah, it just kind of matched perfectly.
Well, the interesting thing there is we just got in a question that said, would Mr. Hall be willing to describe the presence / effect of the backs of the mystery figures, heads in many of his latest paintings? And I feel like that did a good job of really kind of describing that emotional feeling.
Yeah. What was it broke up. What did it say?
Oh, okay. The question was, would Mr. Hall be willing to describe the presence / effect, the backs of his mystery figures, heads in many of his latest paintings? So basically, I feel like that's kind of what you were describing is what the meaning is behind those figures, and seeing it from them looking out into the landscape, which I actually, I did a painting years ago. It was a seascape, but it was from a beach, and I remember that the main thing I was trying to do is show or give the sensation that the important part of the painting was the figure observing the scene. But the problem with landscapes is because of the omission of the actual person that's viewing, you almost forget about that, and it becomes just about the scene. But because you're adding that figure in, I love that feeling, because what it's doing is it's like reminding you that part of the art is the first person of looking out into that shot, so it's you're almost encompassing the experiential by going behind the viewer,
Yeah. And that was kind of the intent of the whole idea evolving to having the figure in the space. Cause I thought, my thought process also was like, well, if I have them in jackets, I was trying to figure out a way to create that experience without any distractions. And I felt like if you knew who it was, or if you saw even like a side profile, in a way it would kind of distract from the idea, because I wanted it to feel like it could be you or anybody. Like I wanted it to feel like you could transport yourself there and have that feeling of being in that space. And so, and they're just super fun to paint as well. Like I love the idea of like I'll keep the backgrounds kind of loose. Like a lot of the mark making is almost loose but because the jacket and the texture and detail of the jacket is a lot tighter, it's like it makes your eye feel like the whole thing is super detailed. You know what I mean? Like it's like it's almost playing a trick on your eye. So it's fun to see the outcome once that jacket is done, and how it puts the whole thing together. So there's a lot of just painting them is fun, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Oh man. So what about I'm going to give you like 5 different things. If you were to give advice to someone who's trying to start out their career, and you wanted to give them 1, financial advice, 2, what was the most important sort of technical advice of painting that has been helpful for you to learn or grow, and 3, like promotional advice, and then and then the fourth one we'll talk about like life balance and what that's been like, balancing family and all of that. So the first, if you were to give one sort of financial advice, what would you say?
Financial, I would say, definitely, and everybody's situation is different, obviously, but with mine being that there was a lot on the line with people counting on me and having a family and stuff, obviously slightly different. But I think it's very important to try to not have a lot of debt, like try to work on not having any debt hanging over you, to where you can build a cushion of money, and then treat it as a side hustle until you have quite a bit of experience on your belt and income coming in, to where you can, like what I did was I kind of had an agreement with my wife. Not that it wasn't an agreement where like she really cared, but it was just like an agreement for myself. But it was like, when my income of my artwork is close to or matching my day job, then I'm going to quit my day job. And so that gave me so much more freedom of having, number one, the cushion, having a lot of my debts gone, but then also being in a place where I was seeing real money coming in and knowing that, okay, this is attainable. And then also not putting all of my eggs in one basket. Like, for example, like not having like all of my eggs in the gallery basket. But what if that gallery closes? What if a pandemic happens and all the galleries close? And so, and trying to find ways of income that's coming in, that's through your own collector base, through your own clients, building that client base, or having passive income, whether that's through print, whatever it might be. So that's like the first thing that pop into my head, financial.
Yeah. Well, actually, those are you hit kind of two of them. You hit the best business advice and then the best financial advice, which those can go in conjunction. So best financial advice: stay as close to debt free as possible, because it is a feast and famine world. And business advice is multiple income streams, finding multiple ways to figure out how you can get a little bit of income from different ways, not from just a gallery, but commission, prints, any online media that can help. So yes, I think those are just two fantastic ones. And then the next one would be family and like life balance. What would be the best advice you could give to somebody to be sustainable and try to create life balance?
Let's see. I think, obviously one of the beautiful things about pursuing any kind of artistic endeavor, or it doesn't have to be the arts, any kind of business you're trying to do. Like, I think one of the amazing things is that when you do have a family, that's like sinking into them, and they're able to watch you pursue a dream. So that's like this beautiful thing, and I think a lot of people don't think about, that I think is beneficial to children. And like, I'm always just thinking about like the fact that my boys and my daughter are like always in my studio with me, and like they're going to remember this. They're remembering my dad is pursuing the dream, and he's doing this thing that he loves. And so I think that has great influence. But as far as like balance, I think it's important to always be on the same page with your family, of like what your goals are, the time that you need to spend to attain those goals. Just being on the same page is huge, and having patience. I mean, having 3 kids running around is chaos. And so being, that could be terrible if there wasn't a team unit like mentality. If it was like, if we weren't on the same page and she didn't believe in me and I didn't believe in her, or she didn't think what I was doing was good, like it was like it just wouldn't work. But because we believe in each other and we're very lucky that we married. I'm very lucky that I married someone who completely believes in what I'm trying to do. And if I didn't have that, I don't know how it would work. Like it would be super
totally hard.
And so a lot of it is just communication. I mean, I know that sounds like a simple answer, but it's just constantly knowing what our schedules are and being on the same page. I keep repeating myself.
Well, I think the key underlining one that you're saying there also is just making sure you're surrounding your people that believe in supporting you, so it's hard enough as it is, and it takes a certain level of optimism just to make it work. To have the people around that say, I believe in you and what you're doing enough to for you to say, I want you to pursue this, is very powerful. So what is your best, or what is the thing that you feel like helps you avoid burnout?
Oh man. I have like a board on my wall of experimental ideas. And so like I have like, I'm constantly almost like a songwriter is walking around listening to conversations and making mental notes. I'm constantly making mental notes of things I see, whether it's in a film or a mute song that inspires me. I'm constantly writing down, and I have notes apps on my phones, and I have them all over in my studio, ideas that are completely fun. Like just
love it.
And I recently went on Amazon and bought a whole box full of squeegee, like silk screening, like t-shirt printing squeegees.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
I'm now, and I don't ever really show these on Instagram. I posted recently one of like doing some undertones with it, but I'm just going to do a whole set of paintings where I'm going to make the paintings, and then I'm just going to use these squeegees to do all kinds of thin, transparent textures all over the paintings. So like,
that's awesome.
So I'm just constantly setting aside time to do stuff that's just fun, and not that the other stuff I'm doing can't be fun. It is, but and then also a mistake that I've made a lot is just the overburden of commissions. Like I've sometimes found myself like in like desperate mode of like, well, I can't say no. Like I'm not going to say no to money, and like especially during when you're preparing for a show, like there's this hard balance that can burn you out where you're like, well, I've got to make 20 paintings for this show and I have a year to do it. But it's going to take me a year to make the 20 paintings. But that means that all that time I'm spending on those 20 paintings, there's kind of a risk there that I'm measuring of like, well, I hope all 20 of them sell when it comes time to the show. So I got to make money in the meantime. So how do I do that? And a lot of times that comes down to commissions to help you out, help float you through that time. And so I've found myself burnt out with that. So now I've figured out like a more healthy balance of thinking way ahead of like, okay, I know I'm going to do a show in 2023. So I'm going to have a plan now to where when I start on that show for 2023, I'm not stressed out about it. So I'm not overburdening myself with trying to do commissions, and I can say no to stuff.
Right. Yeah, man, that's powerful. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily know that, they know that there's a feast or famine, but they don't think about during the famine, what is it you're doing to make sure that you're like staying managed properly. So, so if I hear you correctly, it's manage your feasts you
Right.
know, and store those nuts.
Yeah,
So
that articulated that much better than me.
oh no, yeah, no, that's you know, the great thing about these kinds of conversations is it's just such a collaborative of like, I want to get it to where we have like 2 or 3 people on. So it's just like, yeah, that idea. And then you say it another way. And then you're like, you know, because I'm usually the one that like rambles, and then somebody's like says it in like a sentence. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I could have said. You know, I could have said it. That 45-minute conversation could have been, you know, distilled down into a couple of sentences. But no, man, that's me typically. So I love it. Well, brother, man, this has been awesome. We are near the end of our time. Guys, y'all need to go check out Adam Hall's work. Check out his Instagram and check out the shows that he has coming up. What we're really trying to do is we want to connect with artists that have things going on, as well as just artists that are around everywhere. But one of the big things is if they have shows going on, or, you know, a book signing or whatever, you're about to, I don't know, go on tour with your paintings, you know, whatever it is, we want to help, you know, bring the audience to you. And so y'all got to check him out. Check out his stuff that is at the Robert Lang Studios. They're going to be posting his work and the rest of the other collaborative artists in that show. That's going to be out in July 2nd is when it's going to open. Is it for the whole month?
Yep, it'll be hanging throughout July.
All right. Well, that sounds like a great vacation time to go to Charleston, check out everything hanging. You know, get yourself vaccinated, go see the show. That's what I would say.
Heck yeah.
Man, it's been such a pleasure. I can't wait to come by and see you at the next time I'm driving through Nashville, which is actually often. So
Yeah. You mentioned
Go ahead.
July, August, so I'm here.
Yeah.
So definitely hit me up and we'll hang out. I'll love it. And I'm honored to be a guest on your interview series. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh man, it's our honor, and we're excited about your career. It's only going to go up from here, my friend. So everyone, stay tuned. We have Mackenzie Swanson coming out on the 26th, and we have Donald Journey coming out in July, and we've got some jam-packed stuff coming up for these next couple of months. So stay tuned to what we're doing, and make sure you click subscribe so that it'll and the little bell button so that you can be notified anytime we're doing these live streams. So all that to be said is thank you so much, buddy. We'll catch y'all soon. Okay.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you, guys.
All right.